Yo, today I was thinking we're going to take a look at how we can fetch data in our TanStack Start query. Now TanStack Start is still in beta, so be careful that what I'm saying in this video might change in the future. But for now at least, there is a way to fetch data by default using just the default TanStack loader. And then I'm going to show you how we could improve the user experience a little bit by introducing also TanStack query. So let's jump into the code. Right now I have a really basic application on the right here with a home page such as a home and then a post page which is going to fetch some posts and then render them on the screen. So let's take a quick look at the code. Firstly, I have defined a server function which simply it simulates a delay to so that we can handle loading states, and then it fetches some data from just a JSON placeholder data before it returns it. Also, I have some post query options down here, but I'm going to mention that later when we get to the TanStack implementation. Then inside our route, we have this simple loader function where we call this getPost server function and we simply return it. And when we do this, we can use the used loader data from the route, and this will return a data object with posts and with all the fields of the post. And then we can simply just loop over this data and display them on the page. So let's see how this works in the browser. I'm going to open the network tab so we can see what's happening when we fetch. So using the default loader, we're going to get some nice benefits straight out of the box. We're going to get prefetching when you hover the link, and we're also going to get caching so that when you navigate back and forth the page, the data will already be there, so we don't have to fetch it twice. So let's see how this works. I'm going to hover the post and I'm going to click it right now. So as you can see, the post navigation got highlighted straight away, but it took some time before the post actually was showing. And this is because the 2-second delay that I added on the endpoint. By default, TanStack is gonna wait for all the data to be ready before the page is actually shown. Now with the caching, as I said, if I go back to the home and then to the post again, we don't have to wait before the data is already loaded. We already have it, so it doesn't have to fetch it another time. Now, normally you do want to show some kind of loading state to the user to tell them that there actually is something happening in the background. And you can do this using the default loader by adding this pending component option and passing it the component. You can do it like I have here, just passing it a inline component with loading, or you can create a custom like skeleton loader or whatever, and then pass it in here as you want. Now, if we see how this works, I'm going to have to go to home. I'm also going to have to refresh to clear the cache. And then when I go to post, you're going to see that the loading shows, but the loading doesn't show immediately. The post got highlighted, then it waited 1 second before the loading was shown, and then another second before the post data was ready, and then the page was rendered. And this is a default setting in TanStack. There is a 1 second delay before the loader is shown, and then there's also another default option saying that the loader has to be displayed for at least 500 milliseconds when it is shown. So not all the time. If the page is really fast and it's like less than 1 second, it will not show the loader at all. But if the fetching of your data takes more than 1 second, the loader will be shown, and then when the loader is shown, it will always be shown for at least 500 milliseconds to stop any like flashing of just a loading spinner that you don't really want, because that's bad user experience. But sometimes you don't want to have this like 1 second delay, and you can override that by coming in here to your loader and say pending milliseconds. Now the default is 1000 or 1 second. You can set it to 0, you can set it to whatever you want. And then for the amount of how long the loader is going to be shown is pending min milliseconds. And this is default to 500. And I think that's a pretty good default. I don't really want to change that. So if you now go back to the home, we refresh, go to post, now the loading shows immediately. You don't have to wait that 1 second. And you can set this here on each individual route, or you can go to the global route component and then apply them here so that they will take effect on all your routes. Now, interestingly though, when you navigate from home to post, the loading will show But if you're already on the post page and you just refresh, the loading is never shown. And I kind of want the same experience here as when you navigate. I do want to show a loading state as fast as possible to tell my user that there actually is something happening. So let's see how we can get this behavior when you refresh as well. Now on the left I have changed the code. I have introduced TanStack query. And how we can use it now is in the loader you have this context object, and if you set up TanStack query correctly, if you just follow their guide, or if you use the TanStack Start with query template, this context will have this query client. We can tell this query client that we want to prefetch a query, and then inside here I just pass in the query options, and these are the query options that I mentioned earlier. We just have a query key, a query function. This query function is called in this serve function. This is just the default way I use TanStack query. So we tell the loader that we do want to prefetch with these query options, and then in the route component we actually don't fetch the data at all, but I have created an inner component where we actually do want to use the data. And in this inner component we're using the use suspense query from TanStack query. We're passing in the same query options as in the loader. And with this we get access to the data object, which we can see here has the same properties as before when we used the loader the other way. Then we can just loop over the data and render them to the page. Now the reason why I extracted this component into its own is because now we can wrap this component, which is this inner, in a suspense boundary and provide it a fallback with loading. Now another benefit with this is that you have more control over where the loading is actually shown. Before, when you used the pending component, the whole page was showing the loader. Now we can just wrap the part of our page that actually needs the data, so that everything else, for example this header, is still shown before the data is ready. So let's see how this looks like on the page now. If I go back to home, I refresh so the cache is empty, I go to post, we will see the post heading immediately, the loading, and now the page is done with the data. And if I'm on the page and I refresh, we can see the same exact behavior. So in my opinion, this is the best way to load data in your TanStack Start application to get the best user experience. Now there might be other scenarios where you want to prefer the other method. For example, if you want to render everything on the server to get better CEO. But I think in most cases this is the best approach and most user friendly, so the user gets some feedback immediately when they click your links. Now there is another way to achieve this type of behavior that we have right now without introducing TanStack query, but I'm not going to go over it in this tutorial. You can read more about it in the documentation. There is just one thing you need to know, and that is the loading is part of the TanStack router. Therefore, it's not going to be mentioned here in the TanStack Start documentation. You have to go to the TanStack router and get started, and then all the way down here you have data loading. And here there's a lot of information about how you can load data into your application. And then this defer loading is how we can deal with slow data and streaming, which is basically what we have in our application right now. If you want to look more into the code, I'm gonna add a link to the repository in the description. If you want to look into a more detailed if you want to look more into a if you want to look more into a if you want to look into a more advanced TanStack application, I have created a TanStack Start template which has things like authentication with email password verification, OAuth, and passkey. It has client-side form validation with React Hook, schema validation for your server endpoints with SOD, and Drizzle and all that good stuff. This template is more advanced, but it basically has everything you need for a basic application. So if you want to look more into this, or if you want to use it for your own project, I will leave a link to it in the description. If you have other approaches on how you can fetch data into your components in TanStack Start, please leave a comment. I would love to see your thoughts on this. For me at least, fetching data has been a little bit confusing with TanStack Start. Mutation has always been straightforward, but the fetching of data has always been a little bit confusing. But I think that's mostly because all the documentation is here in the router and not in the Start documentation itself. But yeah, if you have some thoughts, please leave them in the comments, and I would love to read over them. that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you.